This is SPY on the 5-minute time frame. I'm going to go over price targets for Wednesday. We ended the day at $448.73, up nearly 2%. The day's low, $446.09. The day's high, $450.06. This is where we ended at the middle of the trend. To the north side from where we are takes us to 2 standard deviations and a level of resistance and a possible take profit area at 453.16. Above that at 3 standard deviations, roughly 455.32, and at 4 standard deviations and another level of resistance, 457.52. To the south side at -2 standard deviations and a level of support and a potential buy-in area at 444.36. Below that, 442.13, and at -4 standard deviations, $439.96. So if you make it to this line, or this line, I will anticipate a little bit of a bounce as people buy the dip. Looking left, I'm going to mark out this gap, turn on my magnet. Now this gap went up, it gapped up, so what goes up must come down. Eventually this gap will close to the downside at roughly $440.42. But because it's going to close to the south side, I like to switch this over to red so I can see very quickly that that's a gap to the south side. So if I were waiting to get in, I don't think I would enter until at least this gap closes for a bounce to the upside. To mark that out, I'm going to turn off my magnet, flip this to red. I like to put my gaps to the south side in red, color coded, so I know very quickly that it's to the south side again. And this gap that I have pointed out since September finally closed today. And let me extend this. And notice I said this was roughly at $450.06, and what happened? The day's high, $450.06. Right on the dot. Usually I'm off by a couple pennies. Right there. It touched. So this gap is no longer in play. I will delete this. That has officially closed out. We didn't make it to 2 standard deviations, but fell after closing out that gap. Now, there are a few gaps to the south side to be aware of. This one here, I will extend. Still in play. This one is still in play as well. It could extend for days, weeks, months, years. You never know. We are not in this channel yet or in this zone. This is something to be aware of if the market corrects itself or it crashes, as some people believe. This gap takes us down to 433.92 roughly, this one at 430.81, and this one closes out at 422.95. If we close out to 422.95, that would be a potential buy-in for me because I want to get this at a steal. And there's another gap that I shall extend that takes us down to $410.74. The RSI is at 42 and turning up on the 5-minute time frame. Now, because SPY went up, I bought SQQQ today to play the inverse. I have traded this many times in the past. All the blue lines are the lines that I have bought in, and my most recent purchase is right here. I was out of this previously, and now I'm back in. I bought in at 1634. The day's low, I didn't catch it in time, 1619, and the day's high, 1662. Now we are right here, basically at the baseline, the middle of the trend. And right, 1634. Change my background to black. All right, to the north side from where we are takes us to a gap fill starting at roughly 1662. That closes out at it closes out at 1741. 2 standard deviations is 1683. If we make it to this line, I will anticipate a sell-off or a slight correction as people take their profits and they run. Now, the next line, that is the target, will be resistance at roughly 1711. And that gap closes out at basically 4 standard deviations. If we make it to here, I will anticipate another sell-off as people, again, take their profits and they run. To the south side, 1573, 1545, and 1516. If I turn on VWAP, we are at VWAP, or almost at VWAP right here. But VWAP would take us to 1634, right? Oh, excuse me, 1639. Oh, 1634 is my mark. That's where I purchased mine. So VWAP is 1639. And let me show you what this looks like on the daily time frame. Now, I've marked it out many times because I've made many moves on SQQQ, but we have some gaps up here that I'll talk about when we get closer to those gap fills. But I have, again, traded this many times. A 5% return here, 7.97% return here, 1.68% return, 1.71. I basically sometimes just get in and get out very quickly because I do not want to be in this trade. Basically, you can scalp this. I like to swing trade it for a very short swing, very short, small moves. That's all I intend to do with this ETF. And on the 5-minute time frame, we are turning down at 52. Now, the other thing I want to show you very quickly, the green lines there are lines that I sold out. And then the $20.50, oh, is a gap fill. All right, a gap, gap, gap. But I've sold out at 1881 and 1884 previously. Yeah, it's a hot mess because I've looked at this so many times. Now I'm going to go over AMD. I sold out of my position today. We ended the day at $119.88, up 2.65%. The day's low, 119.22. The day's high, 122.11. I could have waited to get out around this price, but I did not want to chance it, and I wanted to lock in my profits. There's a gap here. Let me extend that. And I will extend this gap. All right, we are right here. To the north side from where we are takes us back to the baseline, the middle of the trend, where price always goes up or down through to get to either -2 or 2 standard deviations. This is basically, I consider this the resting place. And that would take us to roughly 120.61. From where we are, this would be resistance. So if we make it to this line, I will anticipate either grinding along this line or grinding sideways for consolidation. To the north side takes us to 2 standard deviations and another level of resistance, 123.54, 125.04, and 126.55. Now, if you're playing the long game, the 1-year price target is 132.25. To the south side, a gap fill begins at roughly 119.59 or 159.60, thereabouts, roughly. -2 standard deviations is 117.62. That gap closes out at roughly 116.78. This would also be support. Now, -2 standard deviations, if I didn't say it, is roughly 117.62. That gap to the downside fills out at 116.78. -3 standard deviations, 116.11. And 114.65. This gap closes out at 113.64. Remember, what goes up must come down. You can rinse and repeat this again because people think the market will crash, although we had some great news today and it ran like crazy. So congratulations if you made some money today. Now, note the sell-off at resistance here, the buy-in here, the bounce at support. And when this is at resistance, this fell down to support. And from here, this is resistance, and price consolidated here along this line, grinding it out before selling off. And looking left here, I last talked about this when it was $112.25. I know Murat was in this too, so I'm not sure if he's still in it. And I talked about it at 108.04 as well. So I wanted to lock in my profits, and I am out of there and on to other things that I would like to trade. Now, I want to quickly go over Shopify as well. I made a move on this one. Now, ignore all the horizontal lines. I sold out for my mother. And I think for nearly a 10% gain for her on this one. We were up, I shouldn't say only, 5% is fantastic for one day on a normal stock. Up 5% there, ended the day at 65.52. All right. I'm going to give you some price levels. To the north side is 67.55 resistance. Another level of resistance takes us to roughly 68.84. And should we be so lucky as to get to 4 standard deviations in one day, I never expect it, at $70.14. To the south side, back at the middle of the trend, and in this case, support from where we are. Let me move this over. It's not quite on that line. All right, to the south side, 64.99. 62.38, 61.06 for support, and another level of support is roughly 59.76. Note this gap, that gapped up. What goes up must come down. It will not fill possibly in a day. It could take weeks, it could take months, but we are in this channel. So I will anticipate this gap to fill pretty easily to the downside. Turn on my magnet, make sure I get that a little more accurately. All right, so it went up, so it's going to fill on its way to the downside, so you can go short there. And if it fills, I will anticipate a bounce because we are at support here. Now I'm going to remove the magnet. So this gap will close out at roughly 62.38. So I bought down here and sold here. Obviously you can wait, keep your fingers crossed that we hit this line, but I wanted to lock in my profits, lock in the profits for my mom. And just a second here. So I bought in at 59.35, sold out for her at 65.80. So she's up 10.87%. So I was very happy with that because the market had tanked previously and I was not up. So I've been grinding slowly higher up and decided I just wanted to lock in for her and be happy with that. All right, the RSI is at 35. That does it for me. This video is getting long, so if there is a stock that you would like me to go over, please let me know. Thanks for watching.